Hi there, my name is Bryson Jones. I'd like to welcome you to our panel today and introduce a panelist. We have gonna go through and make this casual. We have Carl from Orange Logic, and who they produce, of course, Cortex. A lot of people know him well, and then Brian from Media Storm, who said also actually has the product is called Media Storm in that case. So you have three people here who have a background in large scale video, more from our side, from Carl's side, asset management, and then Brian, who asset management, and also Brian, we'll get into your piece here, but also, you know, a little bit of a production background and also the use of video, sort of making video do things, which I think is really key to people when they're thinking about this topic. So first, I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and know that Ray on our team here, Raymond, is taking questions. So we'd love to get questions from you. Particularly like to know from some of you, just an open forum. And Ray, you can kind of, if you want to sort of relay to us, trying to get a feeling for us today. I think a big thing that we talked about in our prep was wanting to know where people are in their asset management journey, so to speak. Are you coming in? Are people coming in from photo side and then working from images and then integrating video and adding to that? Are you people who are starting fresh with, with a, greenfield sort of video project with no asset management in place? Things like that. Some of you actually know on the panel. Good to see some familiar names in here, so know a little bit about it. But and definitely going to lean on anything we say that's controversial. Please, post up or lead us down the way. I'd first like to let everybody have a minute here. Let's start in. Carl, would you like to say hi to everyone and kind of introduce yourself and tell a little bit about who you are and what you do beyond?
Yes. So hi everyone. So I'm Carl Fakradin. I'm the founder of Orange Logic. I recognize some names in the list here, which is great. So we've been doing this for about 20 years. And our specialty, like at least the first 13 years of our existence, our specialty was image and video licensing, essentially. And we are based in Irvine, California, and we survived the fires.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And then Brian, would you like to bring up, give a little intro of yourself and your company?
Yeah, sure. So I've been running Media Storm since 2005. So we're 15 years old now. We're known as a production company. We make films, and we have built some software along the way to drive our business and help our clients do packaging and distribution and monetization of the films and interactive experiences that we've built. And my history is more as a storyteller, to be honest with you. I'm not a classical software developer, but I've built software everywhere I've been. I started off at Microsoft working for MSN News, turned into MSNBC, and I built a production desk for video and audio and photography there, and then went to Corbis and rewrote their digital asset management system at Corbis, and recently have launched our own tools now at Media Storm.
Excellent, excellent. Cool. So we have a few topics that we'll start in on. Again, we like to get directed if we can by the team in here. I think for me, one of the things I want to start of is, and a lot of this for us is hopefully we're going to dispel, for us, hopefully we'll dispel some myths about the industry. I think that's one of the things that, Carl and I and Brian sort of laughed about on our discussion when we were setting this up. I'd like to both of you pose a question. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the bad ideas people have about asset management. I'm going to start with one, which is that asset management software is going to solve all your problems or is the most important part of a project, right? I'd love to talk a little bit. I want to say that one of the topics that we started with, we were joking about, was how not to buy a dam, and so hopefully y'all enjoy that. But I don't know, Carl or Brian, one of you guys want to speak a little bit to sort of the process versus the product? Maybe we talk about that a little bit.
Brian, you want to start, since you have the nicer background?
I don't know, man. Is that a horse or a zebra, dude?
It's a red zebra.
A zebra, yeah. Awesome. So I'm a little confused by the question, the process versus the product. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean, Bryson?
Well, so, and I think Carl and I probably could set this up when we were talking. Part of it is that a lot of people, when they move into any of these projects, from my experience, it was we get a lot of people who come to us who maybe have an idea, but that idea may not be fully fleshed out, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of people we've seen, I've inherited a lot of customers myself. I'm sure you guys have too, who have failed once before trying to do this, right? So part of the thing is that speak a little bit about the importance of like like I said, having a process in place before the dam, right? I spoke to both of you about, for instance, one challenge I know is the media in video, in images, often the acquisition format is what would go into the dam. And sometimes, for instance, in video, that's not necessarily the case. So I know, Carl, you and I spoke a little bit about that. If you could,
Ryan, I can start if you
go ahead,
like.
Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, Bryson. Like almost invariably, I would say nearly 100% of the time, when we engage in a project, our customers are surprised. Like by the time we're done and we launch, our customers are always surprised by the amount of work it requires. And most of the customers we get already had it done before. Sometimes, in the case of one of them, they had 6 dams before working with us.
Yes.
And there's a couple, at least one in here, that has our dam, and she would confirm that it was an adventure. I mean, like no matter how much we try to make this easy, it's always more difficult than expected. And I think the biggest problem we encounter, like there are the two biggest problems we encounter, is one, the transferring of the data. It's typically not very clean. I mean, Cortex is fairly structured and requires a certain level of structure. And very often when we bring it from an older system, we have to do a lot of data cleanup, either us or our customer. So that's a big thing to watch out for. The other one, which I think is almost as big, is all those unwritten rules, like that the old system had. So when we ask our customers what are the things that we need to do, what are the workflows that we need to build, we typically get 20% of all the rules, and we discover 80% as we're moving forward. So it's baked into the process. Like we know that now. At the beginning, we're shocked, but as we got experience, we know to bake it 3 times more effort than expected. And actually, absolutely. Maybe one of our customers can speak now. I will not give her name because to preserve the innocence. But.
And that's something that's really big. So hearing that, what I heard in that, the summary is like you said, know yourself, right? And I talk to a lot of people before they buy a dam, like, before you speak to any of us, you want to make sure that, and if you don't have a clear idea of those problems, they will come out in the process, right? So you make sure you have a team that can help you with that. And then Carl, I use the term internally, we use the term shoveling versus curating, right? There's a time to shovel, and then there's curated, hopefully we get to curation in a dam, right? But then they're off in that. Brian, can you talk a little bit about that? I know you're unique because a lot of the media, at least now that you manage, you created. So I will say that we're both jealous of you because you can control the process through the whole thing. Yeah. So you don't inherit a bunch of badly managed media. So,
well, yes and no. I mean, everyone knows that when you create media, you've started the process. I mean, when I look back at the films that we were doing in 2005, I mean, they're very different assets, right? They're like 640, 480. They're, SD format instead of HD, and there's different challenges. And, you try to start a system early to capture the correct metadata, but that evolves over time. I mean, I think you mentioned the word curation, and frankly, that's where I think we fit mostly into this conversation. We're not the robust dam that Carl has built. We're more about, we would plug into something like that and allow you to do packaging of those assets, but bring new ideas to it, like interactive slideshows or timelines or charts or maps. Like that's where our tool set is unique. So you know, my dev team would critique me badly if they knew I was on this panel. They'd be like, dude, we're not a DAM, we're a packaging tool, right? And so, you know, Leslie saw the tool set that we made and asked me to join this panel. I was like, I don't know if we're a DAM, but you know, I'm happy to come learn from Carl, right? Is kind of the way I see it. I think we extend the DAM is what we do.
Absolutely right, which is something we'll talk about later, because that you know, one of the things that if you've been in this business a while that you know is that it's like, well, you know, Carl, I used to use the term DAM 1.0 and then DAM 2.0, right? DAM 1.0 is just, can I find out where everything is? 2.0 is, can I do something with it, right? But so Brian, but is it, in your experience, is it as bad receiving media from an outside production as it is for everyone else? And I'll ask you that question. Are you used to that? And have you had success in pushing that problem closer to production, right? Are you able to push back on people, or have you had experience with that? Because that's something I would say that everyone in here, if possible, sometimes you can't. But have you, you know, had experience with that where you've done that yourself, or
yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of, you know, contributors and for our publication, for our client work. And, you know, we use Google Docs to sort of organize the workflow for them to submit to us, but people don't follow that. I mean, it's a mess every time. A different contributor is going to send you different assets. And I think your job, once you get those, is to try to organize that in a way that, you know, when a client calls you, like I can't tell you how many times Starbucks, for example, has called us and said, hey, you know that film you did for us 8 years ago, can you send us that file again? I mean, because they don't have infrastructure for this stuff either. And so your job, I think, is to make sure you have a system that, you know, 8 years from now, a client calls you, you can still put your hands on that experience. And so, you know, we've created, I'm sure, you know, very sophomoric workflows to manage the 350 films that we've done in the last 15 years. But it's good enough for me to be able to publish. And for me, the magic happens once it leaves my operation and gets out into the world. That's again where we're focused more on that side of the challenge, the packaging, the curation, the publishing, the distribution, and the monetization.
Great.
But our DAM is, you know, it's pretty simple. It's about the published assets that we're managing.
Yeah. And so we got a question, and it's a great one. One of my favorite statements I'll say that I've ever heard was, you know, especially Carl, when you're doing a consult or starting a project, it's like Mike Tyson, famous quote, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so, you know, hopefully you can, you know, get to that point in the project quicker rather than later. Leslie Hughes presents a question. Says, one of the biggest issues identified by our footage members is dealing with the ever increasing size, 4K, 6K, 8K. How does DAM address video storage in a way that makes it quickly accessible and manageable? And I'll tap onto that is what role does, again, in the process, how do you advise people what is good enough? You know, like I'll add to that. But do you want to, Carl, you want to start in on that guy as far as the rise of the resolution?
So, yeah, absolutely. So I think we're very lucky that there's at least 3 vendors out there, like cloud vendors that have great solutions, like Amazon AWS, Google, and Azure. And essentially, they took a lot of the hard work from us to themselves. So now, if you have an archive, and whether you have, I don't know, 100 terabytes or petabytes, it almost doesn't matter anymore. So what we do is that we take all your assets, like your videos or whatever. Let's say we take a 6K video, we process it to a 1080p, and then even smaller formats than that. And then, so we have the original and then the proxies. And then we shipped everything to either Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. And the original, the 6K, which could be ProRes or Red Raw or like one of those massive formats, we typically send straight to cold storage. And the reason we do this is that the difference in cost is 1 to 5. Yes. But we keep the we keep the 1080p version of it live on S3. So to give you a sense of the numbers, anything on, actually, do you guys, I mean, S3 is the standard live storage that Amazon has. So a terabyte on S3 of live storage costs $21 per month, which is not very expensive at all. And the cold storage is roughly $4 a month. There's even very cold storage, which is almost half of that.
Yeah.
So having that combination of those three things allows our customer to go in, search the video, look at them in 1080p, not worry about whether it's in cold storage or not. And if they want to download it, they click download and we bring it back from cold storage in real time. Yeah. So we do the work happens behind the scene in real time, and they can download the asset right on their own spot. Yep. So they get the best of all worlds.
Yes. I'll speak to that, Carl. I was going to say that I will point out that it makes me laugh that you can see our experience by the gray hair on our faces. Brian, you've dodged that. I'm going to assume that you have more experience than your youthful looks would belie. But I just want to call out in that, summarize there, but Carl said, he said, that is a common thing that I see, Carl, is that people are, and I myself, I'm sure you have to do it. I have to constantly keep up with my numbers and with the pricing and the technology. I spoke earlier this week and I said, 5 years ago, I was concerned that we were making more media than we could store, right? And then that didn't happen because we, like you said, Amazon and Google and everyone came up with that and met the challenge, and on-premise storage as well as met the challenge. Then I was worried that we were making more media than we could manage. And then the rise of big data and very large scale databases and NoSQL technology and things like that took care of that. So I will say that to people who are worried, know that that the people at the true enterprise, even above where we work in the big data, they are solving these problems more quickly in that. Brian, you speak a little bit about that as far as, because I know you, like I said, in your experience, you've had the challenge of creating this media at super high res and then managing all those versions. Yeah.
Well, the first thing I would say is I'm really happy to hear what Carl just said, because it's the same thing we're doing. So it makes me feel like we probably did the right thing if we're doing what Carl did. We use S3 to store our high res asset. Yeah. We allow you to click one button and archive that so that you're not paying the S3 fees, you're paying the offline fees, and it's cheaper. The one thing that we do maybe slightly different is, and this is our whole philosophy, is like we would much rather partner than build. So we're constantly looking for best in breed thing to integrate. So for example, for our video playback, we actually use Vimeo. So we wrap Vimeo's hosted, cut downs in our player. So Vimeo is the hosting solution for video. We love them. They're amazing, credible company, and that's all they do is obsess on how to make video load quickly. So I don't have to think about that. I don't have to think about how to build S3. There's a bunch of brilliant people at Amazon doing that. And I think when you're running a small company, you're always trying to figure that out. Who's best in breed? For mapping, we use Mapbox. It's the best third-party integration we could come up with. And those are going to ebb and flow. Those are going to change and evolve. We just launched, instead of S3, we can also go to Netlify for a flat hosting service of our player. So, I think you have to look at what are the things that you do well, what's the value that you're bringing to the table, and how do you find the best partner to do each of those other things. That's kind of been our key strategy.
Yeah. For my part, is to pitch in on that a little bit with it. Is it also that we believe that you have to move to an automated solution. What Carl was describing, what you're describing, those things are not happening because humans are doing it. So I will say that another thing that from my experience is that as quick as you can move to automating these processes, people get really obsessed with storage tiers when they think that they have to deal with that. But having an asset management system allows those things to happen automatically so that you don't have to think about what tier it's on. Carl, you set business rules and you're like, yeah, this is going to go to Glacier if nobody touches this after this much time or whatever. That's another big change, is that if you're working in an on-premise system, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this panel who came from I drag and I click and drag. And we really want to make sure that everyone is understanding that part of the benefit of a DAM is that you stop clicking and dragging, that you can automate, and that these things can be taken care of for you, because that's really how you're going to manage tens of millions of assets, at scale. Cool. So, all right. So we got through that one. Let me go back. I'm wanting more questions, but I'm going to go back to our stuff. I will tell you that if you come back to us, you're just going to get cranky video damn guys take on everything, but that's all right. So I want to talk a little bit about, you're going to hear me talk a lot about process. And the reason is that that's something that, like I said, that in my experience has been something that people miss. One of the things that we went through in this was we talked a little bit about it. Speaking of to a licensing thing, you both make solutions and have done solutions that allow people to share and reuse their assets. I want to ask a little bit about the challenge, because I think you have different experiences of this. Let's talk about the different strategies of, Carl, I know that you can have a synchronized system where you can kind of have bulk selection of things, and pretty much you technically could share anything out, at any time to anyone. Whereas Brian, I know you're more of a situation where you keep, kind of the large scale internal, private, and then, you would only be sharing curated assets. You mentioned, for instance, you mentioned someone calling you and asking for an asset, right? Looking for that old asset. So can I get some experience about the difference between, and sometimes maybe even some of the the mistaken ideas people have about, start with you, Carl, about the difference between sharing everything and what you share. Like there's this sort of, I always talk about the pyramid, right? There's this giant pyramid or an iceberg where under the water is all of this media. And then you're really trying to get to that curated set. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of making those decisions and doing that sharing versus internal DAM?
So the decision about determining what,
well, that's a legal one.
System where you have part of it shared and part of it internal. Is it?
Yeah, and some of the challenges, because what I think happens is like in Brian's workflow, there would be a very small curated set of media where I would imagine a lot of people have, like I know one of the gentlemen on this panel, he has hundreds of thousands of hours of video, and some of it can be shared and some of it not, right? Talk a little bit about that sort of split world that you live in. I think people have an idea that there's sort of one DAM, and am I right that at this point we're really looking at more of like, well, there's one DAM, but there's many experiences of the DAM, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit about that, about different use cases inside your organization. I think a lot of people, like I said, I'm clarifying here. Sorry, my question was badly phrased. The idea of one DAM to rule them all versus the idea of actually multiple user experiences inside your DAM workflows.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question.
Sorry. Yeah.
And okay, that makes perfect sense. So we do have multiple interfaces to the DAM. One that is geared more towards the internal team. Like if you have an agency and you have videos, like what the tools we give to the people on the inside is slightly different from the experience of the people on the outside. We dumb it down for the external users essentially, but it's the same DAM. So it's just a different profile. So when you log in, if you're staff, you can have much more power at your disposal, like tools like batch edit and transfer and storage management and things like this, keywording, tagging. But if you're an external user, you essentially only have the ability to search, put in your cart, and order or create light boxes. So we restrict to about 10 workflows versus hundreds of workflows on the inside. We have some customers, and I don't know if there's some here, where they have an archive that is so confidential that it cannot even hit the external cloud. It has to be on their internal platform, whether you're in defense and banking or some similar industry. So for those customers, what we do is that we have one instance of the DAM in-house on their own servers, on their own network, and then another instance of the DAM outside, and we only replicate between the cloud version and the internal version those assets that were deemed public, essentially. Yeah. So we replicate a subset of the assets to the public platform. Great. Does that answer your question, Bryson?
Yeah, I really wanted to hear more. The idea was to get you talking about that, because like I said, I think a lot of people, what I found in my experience is a lot of people have this idea that they'll have one DAM, and even if it is one DAM, the user experience is different, right? I know, Brian, you have experience around that as well. It's because what you're actually building that user experience for a certain subset of users. Can you talk a little bit about like that? And if you could, even on your side, how you guys manage that internally, like, talk a little bit about how you did find that 8-year-old piece of content for Starbucks, right?
Yeah. So our just to try to parallel what Carl is saying, I think our focus is on the public side, like the private stuff. We manage that basically with hard drives. So like, we do a film and it can take 6 months and, it's hundreds of gigabytes of data and we're on, 2 hard drives, a working drive and a backup drive. And that's kind of our internal dam is a Google spreadsheet that says this film is on this hard drive and they're numbered, right? And so
I want to stop you. That is totally valid to a certain scale. I just want to say to everybody, you know what I mean? Like, it's really funny. Like, I think Carl and I both would say that we would rather come into a customer who starts from there than a customer who just has a bucket of media, right? So, so I want to say there's no shame in that game. Thank you.
No, it's worked for us for 15 years, right? To do it this way. It's our internal files. The need for that is rare, but you obviously want to keep it, right? When Starbucks comes to us and says, hey, can you give us that film that you did for us 8 years ago? They're not saying, can you give us footage that you didn't use, right? They're saying, give us the final film. And so that's what we've learned is that the final produced media is the thing that we need most to have digitally controlled and shareable and, searchable. And that's where we've made the decision of what's worth tagging and organizing. We do that obviously at a project level when we're in production, but I'm not going to open that film unless someone's paying us a ton of money to do it. And I can find it and I'm going to open it in Premiere or Final Cut or something like that to do it. So we don't manage all the raw, original, unused assets in any way other than that project is on hard drive, 172, and I can put my hand on it easy. It's like right there. Actually, but the finished published file is in our system.
Yeah. Bryson, can I ask a question to Brian? Is that allowed for us to ask questions to each other?
Please.
Do you find it cheaper to store internally on your own systems than to store on cold storage in the cloud?
They're two different things for me, Carl. So one is the raw assets are just on 2 hard drives, right? A working and a backup. The finished published file. So we go from 100 gigabytes down to 3 gigabyte film is the master. Okay. That's what goes into our DAM system, but we don't manage the other 997 gigs is not in a digital system for us.
So you have roughly 1 terabyte of assets. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then 3 terabytes gets published and that's fully managed in our tool set. And we bring all the other.
And Carl, you raise a great point. It's really about scale, right? It's about scale. So Brian, you're at a scale where, like you said, you're working boutique, right? This is really high value content there. When Doug invited me in to do this thing, we were laughing about it together because I'm the shoveler, right? I'm the guy that's building the front end loader. Then I joke that I'm jealous of you two because you guys have Carl, you've had a lot more of experience of this big scale stuff in there too. But I laugh because anytime someone's dealing with a good curated library, it makes me jealous because I'm used to getting, a petabyte of unmanaged, unstructured data, So, but that's a great point because that is one that I believe, Carl, from my part of that is you hit a point. One, we're hitting on something that we won't even start because it would be an hours long argument, which is DAM versus MAM versus PAM, production asset management. And so I've worked a ton around production asset management. And I can share that production asset management is really effective for getting you to the point where you have the nice clean DAM. Carl, you cross that line where you can hold the big stuff and the curated as well. We are the same way, in that. But I will say that, Carl, I think where you're going, and let's see if we can, pull the thread on that a little bit, is that you reach a point at which it's too expensive to just manage it, right? Or the risk is too great. Right? Because at some point, if you're really going to have a disaster recovery plan and you're really going to have backup and you really have truly millions of dollars worth of media on these hard drives, in some cases, I know people on this panel just have a closet full of hard drives. So the question is like, what would it cost you to duplicate all of that and then put it somewhere where it was safe in 2 locations and you could figure out where something was fairly quickly? That's the only way you justify a DAM. It's the only way you justify the cloud, really, at this point, because at some point, the management, the M of this whole thing, gets to be unwieldy. And so that's when the budget starts to kick in. If you're a small production company, Brian, I understand, like I said, you have a couple of hard drives and that's what you do. But at some point, it becomes, for those of you who are in the commercial business or who own historical high value assets, I would say, Carl, I shifted on this a couple of years ago. I would say that now it is more likely simpler and less expensive if you really calculate the cost to go to the cloud. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. We used to not recommend our customers to go on the cloud maybe
same.
7 years ago. Like, that's too expensive. Now it's impossible to beat.
Yeah. And now, so it actually brings up something here, and Eric, I will get to your question because I'm intrigued as well, but it brings up something from Brian Sargent, which says, can you address the difference between theoretical limits of technology, which is great, versus the very real practical limitations imposed by budget constraints, and maybe unforeseen consequences that arise out of the gap between the two? Thank you for phrasing this way, Brian. Think leaving your clothes at the dry cleaner because you suddenly realize you cannot afford to continue down your chosen path, right? So I'll use the example also of like your car in impound. At some point, to get it out of impound is more expensive than your car, right? If you leave it somewhere for a year or two. So I would say that's what I think we just came up to here, is the discussion of that, of like you said, of like, and I think that there's a lot of fear about that. And both of you could speak to that. I think that people are scared that they're going to put their stuff into a cloud system and like you said, maybe someday not be able to afford to get it out. Can we discuss maybe, one, if that fear is real, and then two, some strategies to mitigate that?
I mean, it's not a real fear for me because the asset that I'm managing is epically valuable to us. And, we want to make sure that there's multiple copies of it, that's in secure places, that we can find it easily with a search. But that's not true of my raw assets. Like I've mined the raw asset to a place, turned it into, something that's worth your time to look at. And that's what we manage. The raw stuff, I mean, maybe there's the Monica Lewinsky picture from Dirk Halstead somewhere in our archive, and it could become valuable at some point. But the cost benefit for us is it's too great to manage every single asset that we've created that way. Maybe sometime in the future that will exist and we can ingest, the archive that we've created. And I agree with Carl that the cost has come down so far that it's so much better now. And, we're invested in Amazon, thinking Amazon probably isn't going to go away in our lifetime, right? I mean, they might, but they probably are not going to go away.
So Brian, for you,
coming if it
Carl. So Brian, for you to summarize that, you personally have not hit that inflection point yet where you're like, okay, it's low enough for me to put everything up at this point, and then so you're utilizing on-premise storage, which is still. Carl, I'll pitch to you by saying that I was the same way. I have maintained a strong hybrid approach to this day, which, I will admit, erodes monthly, right? So if you speak a little bit to that as well, as about that, speak about, again, of the fear, and then also maybe mitigation strategies.
So Brian, your fear, just to be clear, your concern is that you're concerned about the cost of retrieving those assets from cold storage. Is that?
Oh, that's from Brian Sargent, not Brian Storm. So this came in from another Brian in the panel. So we can't ask him directly, but he says both. He says both there.
So I don't think it's that expensive, to be honest, because if you look, if you go to the Amazon website, and it depends on the speed at which you want to retrieve your data. If you want to retrieve it immediately, it's expensive. It's very, very expensive.
Well, Carl, I can, let me stop here a second. I do know Brian is dealing at petabyte scale. So I can tell you that from my experience with him, he is a person who, that if they said, I need all of this month, it would be a problem.
Okay. So at the petabyte scale, how many petabytes are we talking about?
Oh, I don't know him that well yet.
But I know that it's major broadcast company scale. Right?
Yes, he's from a very large company. So it is a situation there where, like you said, that may fit. That it's interesting, Carl. Would we maybe say that like there's a sweet spot maybe right in the middle, right? And we're eroding the bottom and we're eroding the top, right? We're growing out because
I don't think so. I think
really?
that
Interesting.
I think that like the amount of money you save every month, if you, let's say after 2 years or 3 years, you want to retrieve everything, like it's worth doing a little financial analysis there. But
Yeah.
I would say after a year or so, the amount of money that you have saved will more than pay for the re-download of all your assets. So, and the cost of the equipment, because like very often people think in terms of equipment, but what is more expensive than equipment? You have to have at least 1 to 2 people who can manage your storage at a petabyte level.
Yeah.
And that alone is $300,000 just in the people, in the cost that people are going to be managing that storage. $300,000, that's more money than it would cost you to bring back your petabyte. I don't know how many petabytes you have, but I mean, if you're interested, Brian, we can do a little, what company has petabytes like that? But anyway, if you're interested, we can do a little cost simulation in Excel, and I might be able to convince you that you're still better off with the cloud.
Yeah. I want to address one thing that comes up a lot with this, and I had to transform my own thinking about it, Carl. I'd love to kind of get your take on it. Brian, you alluded to it. You're like, well, what if this company goes away, right? Oh, what if, what if we assume Amazon's not going to go away? There's an interesting thing where you hit a point of scale of too big to fail, right? And so I'll use the example of, there was another company that provided object storage in the cloud that was advertising that they would not charge egress fees. And I was speaking to them, and I was like, oh, this business model, I was like, these people won't be around very long. And I realized that, and I did this with 2 separate companies. And what I came to in my analysis was that, well, sure, that may happen, but they'll simply be acquired. They're not going to just completely turn the lights off and shut down. It's just an acquisition. And I lived through this actually in the internet when I was an IT consultant back many, many years ago. I had centralized all of my customers on a single internet provider at a time when they were still small internet providers. And one day they couldn't pay their bill and the internet went off for all of my customers. Oh, and really? The truth was, yeah, right? My phone lit up, Carl. It was a hilarious day for me now that I can look back at it. But the case was actually they were down for a few hours.
They're still here.
Yeah, they cut a deal. And, and the next, within a few hours, it was back on, and the company was owned. All those customers were owned by a new company, right? And so I will say that in the cloud, I feel that we're at the same place where it's not whether these companies are going to disappear or something like that. It's just a matter of that. But there are, like you said, there are strategies around egress. And also, if you get to that scale, as you well know, you can talk to those companies. They don't want to talk to me or you, but they will talk to someone who has petabytes of data and address those concerns and pricing.
So there's another thing there is that you should, given the choice of vendors that you have out there, it's perfectly possible to upload an asset. And we do this for some of our customers. They upload one version of their asset and we send it to 2 cold storages from 2 different vendors. And the probability of us losing 2 major vendors like Google and Amazon is very, very small. So small that it would have to be a nuclear war or something along those lines for us to lose those 2 guys. So.
And Carl, we still advise customers who have LTO systems, for instance, on-site archive systems. They'll maintain them. If you're nervous, you do both, right? And then you're sitting on one. We call it the pack up and go. You have a pack up and go strategy, right? You're like, okay, I don't want to do this. Well, then you can just stop that. So, it can be difficult if you're choosing one or the other, but if you already have one strategy, you could maintain that, for a while until, like you said, until that is the way of the world. That's a great question.
So it's $2,000 in super cold storage per petabyte. I mean, it's that cheap, so keep this in mind.
I do think that I will say that, to that, a lot of people forget the actual cost. And it's not just forgetting the actual cost of the on-premise storage or that infrastructure. It's also whether or not that budget falls to you or not. You mentioned, Carl, that, like, oh, well, the cost to the organization keeping the people and the admin and of the hardware, right, is a thing. But sometimes the people on this panel may say like, well, that's cool, but that's not my budget, right? That's IT has to provide that. So that's another strategic thing that sometimes you have to I used to joke that I joked recently, we used to hide from IT, but now we really do need to talk to IT, right? Because you may need to share those budgets and share that load.
So one more thing I would suggest, whatever DAM vendor you work with, this is something we recommend to our customers, get your own account with the cloud company. Like, don't go through your vendor. Because if you do this, then you have 2 points of failures. You have the DAM vendor and the cloud vendor. It's much better to store on your own storage through the DAM. I don't know if I'm making sense.
100%. Yeah.
Right,
Brian,
you're
is
validating
that
some of the
helping you?
decisions that we've made. I wish I'd met you earlier, man, because I wasn't sure because one of the decisions we made is that our packaging tool it's on Amazon Web Services, and you get an account there and you do all your packaging. But when you hit publish in our system, you send all your files to your own S3 bucket, right? We require you to set up your own account because we wanted to have a backup of what you made. And we also didn't feel that it was right to lock in a client to our system to be able to, manage something that they'd made, right? So, you own that flat experience in your own S3 account. We separated those two things.
Yeah. And that's less expensive. I have to go back, actually. The moderators are helping me here with this question. I actually missed a question in the chat. So I'd like to take it like Allison Smith asks, this is a really good one, by the way. What should small nonprofits do if they are looking for DAM systems and don't have the money for a large system? For example, does Orange Logic offer a version of their DAM which has less bells and whistles than a version you might license to another organization such as BBC or Reuters? I guess we'll start out on this as far as small options for DAM. Carl or Brian, who lead off? Carl? You start us, Carl, because Brian's already given us his small option, which is awesome. So
yeah, so it depends how small. So the smallest, like, because of our infrastructure cost, it's very, very difficult for us to go below $100,000 to $110,000 a year.
Yeah.
So that's about as low as we can go. But there are other vendors. One of them is a sponsor actually of this event, Capture. I don't know if you guys know those guys. Not only do they provide a DAM, but they can do smaller scale, but they also help you, if you have a small archive and you don't have anybody to manage the archive, they might be able to help you. I'm making advertisement for Amazon, Google, Capture.
Yeah.
I should get like some money today, but
you need affiliate. You need affiliate referrals, Carl.
And so I'll speak a little bit to that. So two couple of things here. So Brian, one thing is your strategy, Brian, your strategy of using a file system and in using that is definitely one. I used to do a presentation about asset management for people who were not ready to buy a DAM, because you can do a lot of asset management before you buy a DAM, right? Naming schemas, correct file systems, and keeping things clean and be ready for a DAM. There's also things, as Carl's speaking to his side of it, but yes, there are a lot of inexpensive DAMs. I came up from the bottom. I work with an inexpensive DAM called CatDV. Axle is quite inexpensive. And then there are also systems that if you don't need to share widely that you can use things like, there's even things like, NeoFinder and little indexing programs that allow you to do things like that. I used to use a thing called CD Find It, I think, back in the day. So there's things like that get you to that level. I do want to point out one thing, though, speaking to Allison with it, because there was some discussion. We were going to have someone on here who was from an open source DAM, and there's some projects out there that are open source DAM. And I have to say that I was not able to get my research done, so you should check them out. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to point out to you, and Carl, you spoke to this really well, is that the software is not the solution. And so we want to be careful about saying, oh, go get open source software, because there are all sorts of open source CMSs out there that you could get. But I would be disingenuous for us to tell you if you don't have much of a budget, because you're going to need developers and you're going to need people to. So the project of a DAM, of what we're calling a DAM, sure, Cortex or CatDV or whatever it is part of it. but it's actually much more than just the software. And so for me, somewhat against my own best interest as a businessman, but as an engineer, I'd say that be careful that you're paying attention to the cost of your process and all of that before you actually worry about the software, because no matter which solution you chose, I'm sure, Carl, you and I both agree, there are certain immutable things that you must do to implement a dam that have nothing to do with the actual software product itself.
Total cost of ownership
Yes.
can change drastically depending on the solution you choose.
Yeah.
I just want to plug one quick thing. Sorry, there's also a study by Sharon and Don Resnick called 2020. I don't know if you guys know.
They're in the chat. They just posted in the chat.
Yeah. So they provide a good solution for, like, they have a package for smaller agencies. Anyway, so regarding the cost of ownership, what we sometimes see with some of our customers is that when we start working with them, they have a team of 3, 4, 5 people working full time on maintaining the dam and the database and the DBA and things like this. And we tell them, look, you're going to be able to let go 4 of those 5 people, if not all 5.
Yeah.
I mean, not let go. I mean, they will be able to go and do other stuff.
Yeah.
And they can save almost $1 million just in labor, because we take ownership of all those things under the dam, essentially. And so they look at our price, and we tell them, we're going to save you 4 times as much as our price just in labor. Obviously, if you're very, very small, that won't be the case. But the bigger you become, the more we can remove, like, IT cost and all those, all those costs.
Yeah, I would just add that I think MediaStorm is a solution for smaller organizations like that, because our low end price point for NGO is like $5,000 a year, so it's super affordable. Like, it's not going to be the Orange Logic, super, ballistic 20-year built out strategy that Carl has, but it'll give you the basics for sure. It'll give you a fundamental way to, store your assets and find them. And it gives you the huge advantage of being able to publish very sophisticated packages.
Yeah, and like you said, if you're below that level of, I'm ready for software, that does not mean that you are not working on your asset management strategy. Does not mean that you're not working on cleaning your media and getting it there. That's the biggest thing that we can tell you is don't wait for the dam to trigger your asset management process, right? The purchase of a dam should be sort of maybe the middle of that process, not the beginning. And we see, I'm sure, Carl, that I have the same thing where I come into customers where, it's the second, the third time they've tried to put in a dam. And in every case, we find out that they chose software before they fully understood or had that going. We have a question here that I'm actually curious about. I have 0 experience with, by the way, and so I want to call this out. And I am going to bust you, Eric, a little bit because it's pretty self-serving question, but God bless you. I love it. I admire your hustle. So Eric from Steg.ai says, how are dam providers thinking about challenges in content authentication and also copyright protection? So you guys take it. I'm interested to hear how you each are handling that. Brian, you want to kick in? You're
sure.
nodding.
I mean, when I worked at Corbis, this was obviously a really big topic, thinking about, copyright protection. In fact, at Corbis, our copyright violation, our legal team was actually a profit center at Corbis, if you can believe that, because, often it was much more expensive to, if you license it, you'd save a lot of money versus getting sued over using something inappropriately. So we were kind of okay with copyright violation. It was a profit center for us there. I mean, I think the way the world has evolved here has been very exciting. I love what Adobe's doing with the content authenticity initiative. I think it's super, super important idea. And we should have been doing this many, many, many years ago before, fake news and fake capabilities got so great. I mean, I think it's caused huge problems with our democracy that you don't know who to trust anymore. You don't know what's true. And so that's a problem that I'm not sure, frankly, that software is going to solve for us. I think this is a societal problem that we have to figure out educate our readers in a way to sort of challenge the source of information. With that said, I think there's great tools that are emerging, like what Adobe's doing. I hadn't heard of like Smart Frame before. I just saw that here at the MLA. I want to look into that. I think there's a bunch of cool integrations that could be done. And, you know, we as an industry need to hustle on this. We're way behind the 8 ball. You know, the cat's way out of the bag on this problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Carl, do you have some stuff on that or experience around that?
Not really. Not enough to add value.
Yeah. Hey, I would say that that this is one of those cases, speaking to Brian, what you're saying, this is one of those cases though that you can't do something like that without a dam. You need that base information, you need that metadata, you need a way to automate. And so that's really the key, that if that is a concern of yours, we'll know that, you know, and Carl, you'll probably back of this part of it, is that if that's a concern of yours, we'll get started now, because you're a ways away from that. Because if you have your data in an unstructured fashion with no database, no nothing, well, then there's not a really effective way you could apply those tools or even track them. So it's a good piece with that there.
So yeah, so there are multiple companies who have like those non-destructive watermarking in video and images. So essentially they get embedded. You can embed like 150 characters in your video, and any portion of the video will detect those 150 characters, and you'll know that it's your video. In all honesty, I don't know how effective it is. It sounds really good. I don't know.
I'll tell you one of the really interesting sort of low-hanging fruit places is that we were doing some discovery work on artificial intelligence solutions for content analysis, things like that. And we found, you know, it's not pitched as such, but Google will tell you, because of their insane indexing, they'll tell you where an image is used. So you can simply connect for pennies. You can send your file to Google and Google will respond back, oh, here's where we found that. And we found it was sort of by accident. We found a customer, we ran their data, and then we found like 12 sites where their data was used. And so we were laughing about it. And then we designed a solution around that, where we had a customer that said they were so the customer was a online service for like vacation rentals. And they wanted to know that their exclusives were exclusives, right? That the hosts were not, you know, faking them out and saying, oh, it's exclusive, and then using it on 6 Flags. And we realized that you could actually just run those images through Google Images, and they would return back if they were used on other sites. And so it was actually a really simple solution. So I will say that AI is changing that. And there's a lot of uses for artificial intelligence, which is another panel we're getting to the end, that don't just make sense of, well, is this a cat or is this a dog? It's like, oh, there's other sorts of analytics that, again, once you have things in an asset management system of any brand, then you can connect via APIs and do some of the things that like Brian's talking about, where you're actually making this stuff do something instead of sitting, you know, in your, you know, just in a database where you can find it. We're coming up to us on time. Do we have anything else from anybody in the audience? Anything that burning desires that anyone's like, oh, you haven't talked about at this point? Anything on there? Do not make me go back to one of our annoying gray-haired cranky video guy discussions. So a great one. And this is beautiful. Leslie, once again, Leslie Hughes, what is on the horizon? Gentlemen, what is on the horizon? Let's and what's funny is that the horizon now is probably 6 months to a year, maybe 2. You know, it's so fast. What do you both see on the horizon? I give you guys 2 minutes each. Hit it.
Horizon for what exactly? For
video? For the dam industry. Make your progress, you know, make your projections for the next couple of years. What are you going to see? What are we going to see the rise of? What's exciting? What's exciting you? Yeah.
So I think what excites us the most, would you like me to start, Brian, or do you want to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl. Sure.
Please.
So what excites us the most is all the workflows and procedures around, a little bit to Bryson, is all the workflows and the procedures around the storage of the asset.
Yes.
Increasingly, as you know, like in the United States, the country puts less and less physical products. Like we're producing more and more digital product. And we see the market for DAM vendors growing almost exponentially from year to year. And this is very exciting. So we work with some companies that have 300 departments, and every single one of them has a different workflow and different procedures and approaches and ways to optimize their things. And with one of them, like one project we did recently, we were able to decrease their like from creation to finalization of their assets by 40%. And those 40% represents something like almost $100 million a year. So these projects are absolutely amazing. Like things are happening at a scale that in the old days we didn't think would be part of, and it makes us very excited. So
it's beautiful. Thank you. Brian, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the storytelling side of things, and I just think the world that we're in as independent storytellers is it's exploding, right? I mean, it's super hard to do because you're sort of authoring once and publishing many. You got to get out on all these channels. And so we've automated a bunch of that where you do authoring in one place and you can publish to multiple locations. But I'm a big believer actually in the web page, long live the web page is where my head is at. Because I think social has really kind of hosed the independent publisher. I mean, they've taken our audience, our brand, our analytics, our business model, and we get a bag of likes in return. And I think we need to take it back. I think it's time for independent publishers to take control of their own publishing strategy. And the good news is the tools have gotten to be so good now that if you have a story to tell, that you can tell it in a pretty profound way. And there's, good tools to manage it. There's good tools to package it. There's good tools now to monetize it. So I'm super bullish about where storytelling is going. I don't think it's going to go out of style. I think the tools have made it easier to manage it, produce it, publish it, package it. And it's a really exciting time. And it's not just the indies, it's everyone. Every brand is a storyteller now, right? Every brand is generating, as Carl says, enormous amounts of digital information, and they have to have a good system to control that. And they also need a good way of actually becoming a good storyteller, right? You've got these NGOs now that they used to outsource storytelling. Now they are doing it internally. They're telling their own story to their own customers. So it's a pretty cool moment, I think. I feel like we're coming out the other side of a lot of really heavy duty lifting and no real business model on the web. And now that's finally emerged, and that's going to, power the next generation. The next 10 years should be quite interesting to see what happens in this space. I think it's going to be a blast.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both for doing this. Thank you for the attendees. I was taking notes all through it. So if you saw me looking down, I'd like to leave everybody with this, that a few years ago when we would do these, I would be involved in these, and I was always disappointed because it always felt like we weren't quite to the solution. I want to know that if you listen to those gentlemen talking about the horizon, they're talking about automation. And so through this whole thing, scale and automation. And I think that we've all been waiting till at least mid-sized or smaller organization could put all of their assets under management and storage safely and securely. And whether that's by the labor or by the storage. I just want to say that I think the theme of this, hearing from them and even looking at the questions, is that we are now at the age where we can do that. So 2021, we're going to move forward into automation and scale. And, I just can't wait to see all the amazing content that all of you bring out to the world. Just thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks a lot.